Hello, the purpose of this video is to bring some attention to sighting of UFOs that happened a few years back, several years back, but more recently I was prompted to put this together because of a sighting about a year ago. I just received some information on that, so I decided to put together a little video now. This is unscripted, so please bear with me. To get the introduction out of the way, my name is Jeff Sell, and I'm a private pilot and a photographer. So the setting is Joshua Tree National Park, and there's a group of 25 people there. During this night, at approximately just after 11 p.m., we see two lights ascending rapidly out of the combat area from the 29 Palms base, which is approximately 20 miles to our north. We see two lights, bright white lights ascending rapidly. Somebody brought that to my attention, and who saw more of it, probably maybe lifting off from ground level perhaps. I see it when they're already probably a couple thousand feet high and they're ascending fairly rapidly. Now, two white lights like that, immediately I thought, well, those are rocket launches. Uh, I didn't see a plume, like a rocket would leave a plume, but they're far enough away where the plume might not have been as apparent as the bright white light. So I was assuming they're rockets. Anyways, within 2 seconds, though, shortly after initially seeing them, within 2 seconds, they were right over our position. So they moved horizontally some 20 miles in 2 seconds. And some of the people in the group gasped when they suddenly realized they were right above us because it was so unusual. Now, was no noise and there was no wind displacement. There's no indication. That's the reason people gasped, I believe, is because it was so unusual that they could move like that. Anyway, while they're above us, one of the lights started to ascend, and not in a straight line. Now, if you picture a clock, it made a movement from the 6 o'clock position up to the 12 o'clock position, as if this light was attached to the tip of the clock arm. So it made an arcing motion all the way to the 12 o'clock position, just like a clock would have. I noted that that was unusual. Why would it do that? Why would it not just go from point A to point B, and why would it have an arcing motion? That question was answered shortly afterwards, when one of the photographers at this event, who had a full spectrum converted Canon camera, actually got a picture of the object. This object, this vehicle, would not have been seen had it not had the white lights. So I think it's obvious that it wanted for us to see it. Like I say, if there's no lights, we never saw it. We wouldn't have known. There was no noise. We wouldn't have known it was hovering above us. Which makes me wonder how much this thing flies around. However, I have to say that in the next week, in that week that we are at the Joshua Tree area, we saw it 3 times. So it was flying around regularly. And what's noteworthy, and this is where I would like to hear from other people in comments, the fact that it flew through restricted airspace and civil airspace and was unmolested by the military, and you can't tell me the military couldn't somehow sense that this object is there. I mean, we're talking this thing, I'm guessing, but the arms were at least a half-mile long on this, and that makes the whole ship the size of a small town. So this thing's flying around, making no noise, no signs of propulsion, just floating around as it pleases. It did, like I say, we saw it 3 times that week. So, that leaves a couple of scenarios that, is this thing ours or is it ET's? And when you look at it, to me, it doesn't have this refined, shiny sport model look. It's a pretty bulky, ugly looking compared to a service vehicle. It's not an attractive looking vehicle at all. It's like a service vehicle. Does it matter what it looks like? No, I guess not. But that just pushes me to the thought that it's ours. It's not some refined space vehicle. It's some sort of service vehicle that our military is using. So now that sounds pretty far-fetched. I know to a lot of people that are first hearing this. We have a huge ship that can cloak. Certainly we can't have that kind of technology. Here we're talking anti-gravity and, for lack of a better term, and the cloaking ability, two things that we're not supposed to have. Okay, let's say we don't have them. Then what is it? And why is it flying around with impunity? And, this isn't a figment of my imagination. This is documented. This is a documented event with 25 people witnessing the event and the camera picking it up and getting more than one picture of it. That's how we know the arms can articulate, they can rotate. This opens up a whole bunch of questions, and please feel free to comment on this. Now, the thing that prompted me, now this happened 7 years ago already, the thing that prompted me to do this video is that a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, I see these two lights out at Joshua Tree. I have a video of it, and we'll be showing that. The two lights appeared, they flashed in some 3 miles away from us. And where do you think its destination was? Well, I don't know where the final destination was, but it flew right over the 29 Palms combat area. Again, or aircrafts. Those two lights could have been two tail lights on some big jets, perhaps. However, there was no noise. And there were no other lights. There were no rotating beacons, anti-collision lights, strobes, navigation lights, all the lighting necessary to be flying at night in a congested airspace. Here it's in civil airspace. It's not lit properly to be a FAA legal aircraft, nor did it hesitate to go through restricted airspace. Most commercial air flights will avoid restricted airspace because it requires special permissions. And you can't run a scheduled operation having to rely on getting permission to go through restricted airspace. So commercial operators just don't do it. Okay, so that's my story. I am very interested in hearing from other people, and please, it wasn't satellites, and it's not normal aircraft by any means. I have in the video where United Airlines, say 1145, flies into the picture at 35,000 feet. And he's moving at 600, almost 600 miles an hour. So that one flies in, and then second one flies in at 24,000 after the object was already out of sight. So that gives you an idea at the altitude of this thing. The altitude was I think well below 10,000, but our ground elevation is around 4,500, I think, at the time. So it's not that far away. 3 miles away, maybe 5,000 feet above us at the most. Mile high, 3 miles away. That's where it originated. I mean, he flashed in. Poof, he's there. Anyway, take a look at this video. It's sped up by 4 times. And some things to note is that no aircraft flies cockeyed like that unless they're in a very strong crosswind component. And if it's 2, and if you notice you can see some light in between them, sometimes some starlight, which seems under normal circumstances would seem that there's 2 aircraft, unless it's cloaked and you can see through it, which is the case with the other one. You could see stars through it. So yeah, I'd like to get other people's opinions on this. Just keep it civil, leave some comments, observations. Be happy to answer any questions. I have all the data I can collect, so I would be interested in seeing someone with some advanced math skills or software to calculate, since I have some data, calculate maybe the speed and altitude. All right. Or, it'd be nice to hear from somebody that lives in the area. Do they see this often? Okay, so I'm just curious, is this extraterrestrial origin? Is this some military operations? Some secret military hardware? It'd be nice to know. Thanks. One other thing, some of this was predictable. Some of this, there seemed to be some consciousness component to it. So this, it's not all nuts and bolts here. There's also some other connections that I could bring up too. So let me know. In the next few clips, I'll be superimposing the arms with dots on each tip to emphasize what we saw in 2016. These will be superimposed over the 2 lights that we have here from 2022. Just to give you an idea of what I see in there. I'm not trying to do anything fancy here. I can't do anything fancy, so it'll be obvious. But that's just to get the idea across. Okay, we're halfway through the video, and this is going to be another view of the events from that September of 2016. We are what Dr. Greer calls an advanced group, meaning that we have done other expeditions with him, at least one. So that's all the people that were allowed in this particular case. Let's go back to the lights rising out of the military base. We have two lights hovering above us. Ascended again after a short period of time, maybe. It was parked there, I think 15 seconds probably at the most. And then it started rising again and moved off to the east. Amazing. We were blown away by that. So shortly thereafter, we take periodic breaks, after 11, and we take what turned out to be kind of a long break for myself and my buddy Jeremy. We walked out because we do this during the breaks. We go out and explore. Many times we sense that there's activity around the group. So he picks this spot and he sees a white light. He says, "Hey, a white light just swooshed around us. It looked like a ribbon." And he says, "Do you see it?" And I says, "No, I didn't see it." He says it was bright and it was big. He probably chuckled that I didn't see it. Must be blind or something. But we oftentimes out there we see these little pinpoint lights, and they're usually white or red. Sometimes they're a different color. Camera picks them up. I take pictures of them. Anyway, getting back to the story, he then says, "Whoa, did you see that?" And he says a red light just went around us. He says it looked like a ribbon. It was that big, and we were about 10 feet apart. And he says it went around both of us. So I never saw it. Never saw it. And I'm tuned into, what's going on. I'm looking for little pinpoint lights and things like that. And I see them sometimes. I did get some pictures of them during this event. Next thing you know, he says, "There's a purple light behind your head." Well, it's behind my head, so naturally I'm not going to see it. But you'd think there'd be some kind of a purple hue. It's dark out, and this light was quite prominent. Anyway, he says, "There it goes." So he says, "Take a picture." And this thing shot ahead of me. I took a picture, and I never just to remind you all, I never saw a thing. Camera picked up a purple light, though, when we reviewed the footage the next day. A purple light. A very interesting picture, too. It looks like things are coming off of it, and it's leaving like little tufts behind it as if it's in motion. That was a very interesting picture. So by the time we got done with our break and having this experience out there, and there's other things that went along with that, and that's a feeling, and there seems to be a barrier with energy that we walk through. That was quite strong. So when we got back to the group, Dr. Greer, everybody was behind Dr. Greer because he had his laser out and he was pointing it at this, what he described as a craft that was 50 foot in diameter and was 20 feet off the ground. It was cloaked. You couldn't see it. But the laser, when the laser hit it, it diffused the laser. He says that he asked if everybody could see it, and I could see it. And that just so happens that's where we were just minutes before. We were there for underneath that for probably 10 minutes. Yeah. My thoughts on that is that when that big craft was hovering above us, before it moved out, it dropped some probes or some other craft or something, but they were cloaked as well. That's my theory. And that was one of them that left behind. Now, if you notice, and I brought this up earlier, that this big craft with the arms, if it didn't have lights on, you'd never know it was there. It's huge. So I'm imagining that anything that comes out of it is going to have the same abilities. You know, if it's cloaked, and why wouldn't the small craft be cloaked? And it came right to us. It came right to us. I mean, what? Why would it do that? Now, my view in the first half of this video is that it's probably military basically by its appearance. I don't know that. That's one of the purposes of analyzing things and trying to put the pieces together, because this is so different. And could it be the military, or was it ETI? Now, could an ET craft be flying around with impunity? Some people think so. Some people know that they would be able to exploit our detection systems, our sensors. They would be able to exploit maybe where there's certain times where it's not monitored, the system's not monitored very well, and then it pops in. So this is all, to me, it's all believable. I think it's a good theory. I mean, humans, a guy gets up to go to the bathroom and walks away from the scope that detects things like this. They would know that. I mean, if they can, we all heard the stories about these craft that can shut down missiles. If they can shut down missiles, they know what they're doing. All right, so, and they have the abilities to know what's going on. So that's one view. This thing was near the base, and it is time to leave, and they came up and they says, hey, there's a group down there, let's go see what they're up to. Something like that. I'm just thinking out loud here. Okay, the next thing. This is a few days later. I'm not sure which day this is on, but Jeremy and I were on break again and thought, we're out there and we can sense that the ETs are out there. And if you do this enough, you'll notice it comes with a feeling, a certain feeling that, and it's unmistakable and it's specific to their presence, ET's presence on the ground. We convinced him to walk down a path out in the desert and to be amongst the ETs, okay? So he was reluctant at first, but we got him to go. And I was like number 4 behind him. Jeremy was kind of taken up, was probably in the middle or so. But I was like 3 or 4 behind him. And my job was to keep people in single file. That's what we're trying to do, a little crowd control, because everybody wants to get close to Greer because he's the one that sees stuff all the time. Anyway, so we, make a long story short, we stopped. Well, suddenly we stopped. He says, there's a red orb in front of me, 20 feet in front of me, he said. And, this orb. I saw the orb. It was 20 feet in front of him, and it was the size of a kid's soccer ball, about 8 inches in diameter. A small soccer ball. It was red, but it had like an orange interior. The interior was like a liquid. It was moving, and I compare it to like the swirling inside of a glass marble. Except this was moving. It was actively moving, and it was just the orb was 4 feet off the ground, just stationary. Then it moved another 20 feet away from us. It made a right angle turn. The whole time it stayed about 4 feet off the ground. Made a right angle turn to the right, and then made another right angle turn. So now it's about 40 feet away, and it's lined up so that it's parallel with our path. At this point, when it was a beam of me, when it was next, as close, the closest point to me, I noticed that ahead of it was another orb. It was the same diameter, but it stretched out 2 feet long. And it was headed, they're both headed away from us. Now this one was pulsating. It wasn't as bright, it was pulsating. The color and dimension wasn't pulsating, but the brightness of it was. So at the rate of, say, a breathing, it would get bright and dim, like inhaling, exhaling. Then, like I say, the dimensions didn't change. It was just the brightness. So it was pulsing as it led the other one out and down parallel with their path out of until it went out of sight. I never thought of this, but until I started making this video. First off, we also, when we broke up from that, we left right after that, but I looked ahead. If we would have kept on the path, we would have walked into a wall of fog. Now this fog was probably another 150 feet, half of a football field away from us yet. And it appeared to be about 15 feet high, and it seemed like hundreds of yards long. So when we were walking away, I asked everyone, I says, does everyone see that fog out there? Yeah, everybody did. Yeah, they shook their head. Yeah, we see it. And, there's speculation what the fog could be. It certainly isn't natural. I mean, we're in the desert at night. It is cooler, but the dew point spread is like 20 degrees. That's not even close to justify having fog out there. So maybe it was smoke. Well, whether it's fog or smoke, where'd it come from? There's nothing burning out there. So it appears to me, I go with fog because it appears like fog. And I've seen smoke too, not really up close, and it looks just like smoke. Fog and mist are different. So, okay, so we're walking away, but before I go any further, the thing that the revelation I got, now we're walking towards the fog. We didn't know it at the time, or I didn't see it at the time. Not until I didn't notice it until after the orb left. Red. Okay, why? What's the significance of red? Well, red, let's look at this from a basic viewpoint. Red means stop. This thing stopped Dr. Greer from moving forward. It planted itself 20 feet away. He didn't go any further. It's red. It meant stop. And then it directed us back where we came from by running parallel with our trail. And it was moving back where we came from. So it basically said, stop, go back. That's what I get from that now. That's exactly what we did too. And as we turned around, then we went back a ways, and we noticed this black figure forming. And I was watching it over 10 or 15 seconds. I was basically watching, it's dark. It's in the desert. It's midnight or so. I can't remember the exact time or which date it was. It is documented though. Um, so I see this form, I just see movement, this black movement, right? And it formed up to something that was like 9 feet tall. Did this over, well, when I was watching, over a period of 10, 15 seconds. Uh, and the thing that really kind of got me going is that the head looked cube shaped and it was moving around an awful lot. It was just moving all over. It was moving, looking back and forth. So what I see is a 9 foot tall shadow, basically. It's a shadow with a cube-shaped head that's turning back and forth, and it has shoulders. It had the proportions of a humanoid, basically, but it had a cube-shaped head, wide shoulders, probably 3.5 feet wide. A good meter for sure, maybe a little more. And there it stood, and there's two people next to me, one on each side. And I asked them, "Do you see that?" And they says, "Yeah, we see it." And I went and got Jeremy, who was with a couple of other people, and okay, so he was with two other people, and he noticed it right away. And we all approached it then in a non-threatening way, and as we did that, it moved forward and dissipated into the ground. That's what it appeared to do. So there's more to that story. You know, how do you explain that? First I'd like to say there's someone that's kind of new on YouTube that's really interested in this. His name's Eric Weinstein. Now I forget what his expertise is, but he's a scientist and he's very intelligent and he's articulate and I like listening to him. He's when he's discussing things with others, especially another intellectual. When those two go together and discuss things, it's a different experience to watch them. I don't have like that kind of access to that caliber of scientist, but the reason I bring this up is he's become interested in this, and I want everyone to know. And this is on YouTube. He even mentions I forget which YouTube video I was watching, but when he heard about the possibility that this UFO stuff and ET things, all this talk about it, he he was repulsed at the thought that it could be worth even his time at all, or any time, academia's time. He was physically, he said, he would get physically ill at the thought that this had any credibility. So now just think about that for a second. This is what we're up against, those of us that uh, want to merge with the scientific community and try to get help to figure this out. Uh, let's go back to the ribbons, for instance. Now, if I was sitting next to Eric and trying to describe what happened like I just did earlier, what would he think if he was in my shoes and the person next to me was saying, "Whoa, look at that, there's a white ribbon and then there's a red ribbon and then there's a purple thing behind your head of which you see none of, you see no evidence of that, and this person's describing it, and it's bright, it's bold for this person, it's not something that's subtle." What would Eric think? Now, he'd probably think he's nuts and would avoid him like the plague. uh, However, we got a picture of it. Now, this changes everything. This changes everything, and it puts the need for evidence to the person that didn't see it. The person that saw it, he's it's been verified. It's real. It's the camera picked it up. So now the person that didn't see it, That's the subject. Why didn't you see it? This one event is a snapshot of what we're facing and who we are as the experiencer community. We are not the ones that need to prove anything to anyone. The pressure is on the people that don't even have this in their belief system, that are physically repulsed at the idea that this could be real. So the evidence, they need to catch up. We're not the ones that should be taking the submissive role in science. Anytime we report something that happened, and we have to be careful with this, to make better observations and to back it up with some data if we have it, and should definitely learn how to come up with data that will help our observations. I can't get into all that right now. I'm already over time. But I would like to say and recommend a couple of videos with Eric Weinstein and Joe Rogan. There's two that I'll list with this video. I'll leave the links. I want to thank you for your time, and I'd appreciate if you would leave a comment, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them if I can. I could go on tangents with this and go on and on for quite a while, but your comments will direct me on what I should put in for content in the future. I hope this was informative to some people, at least. And I'm looking forward to doing more if there's enough interest in it. All right, thank you.